Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of No Questions Left Behind. I am Nick.
I'm Sam.
And today we're going to take some time to answer all the questions that we did not get to in our live event this past Wednesday.
There were lots.
There were lots. One of our most popular topics, again, part of our mantra here at Griot's Garage is we make it, we teach it, we guarantee it. We've been selling random orbital polishers and systems for them since 1992. We've taught a lot of people how to get their paint better in an easier way by using a machine, breaking down that barrier.
Save some people money on repaints, and I think surprised a few folks at what can be done with a random orbital and a little bit of expertise.
Yeah, for a lot lower investment than you're going to pay a professional, and it's a skill that you'll always have and can always get better at. So this topic was the basics, right? We're answering questions. There is no dumb question when we're trying to get you to jump into this world. It's a lot of fun. Sam and I have been doing it for the majority of our lives now, which is kind of crazy. But you guys have great questions. We had over 600 unique questions, and we narrowed them down to some of the repeating topics, categorized them. So we're going to work through them as fast as we can. We've got our handy dandy 95 Range Rover that we were demoing on yesterday to show you a couple different techniques as the questions require them. So let's not waste any time and start right off. We will have some winners that we will announce too. So if you are tuning in because you didn't get your question answered, stick around. We will announce a winner, and you have to email us at social@griotsgarage.com to claim your prize, which is a G8 and G9 two-step ceramic kit.
Same giveaway we were doing during the lives. You got another chance. All right, well, Charles Long. So these are all questions about steps. We've got these kind of segmented into topics. Charles Long asks, when polishing in Arizona drier/warmer conditions, can you apply wax on the entire car and then remove it, or should I go section by section? That's a great question. A lot of traditional wax products recommend or tell you you can apply to the full car before removal. In your situation, if you're working in a dry, hot climate, I would definitely recommend doing sections. So that may not mean you have to wipe off after each panel, but you may not want to do the full car. Do a quarter of the car and wipe off, or do half the car. You can actually do a little test spot before you get going on the full car section. Wax a square foot section on the hood and check it every 5 minutes or so to determine how long it's going to take for that wax to set up and be ready to wipe off. A good way to check that is to just swipe a finger through the wax residue. If you get a clean swipe, it's ready to wipe off. If you don't get a clean swipe and you just smear the product, then you want to let it set up for a little longer. And that's true for most traditional wax or sealant type products.
In general, heat is the enemy of a lot of these paint processes. So if you're fighting against heat, work in smaller areas.
Yep, makes your life a lot easier and prevents you from having to scrub any wax residue off the paint.
Yeah. If you do find yourself getting a little stuck because the wax cures prematurely, a quick detailer such as Speed Shine can help remove some of that residue without stripping the wax off entirely. Chris McD asks, if you have or get the Boss creams, is there any need for complete compound polish? If you're intending to use them on primarily machines, the answer is no. The benefit of the compound and polish is that hand application, slightly larger, abrasive. However, our Boss creams are definitely our peak technology, highest grade submicron abrasive technology. So you're going to get great experience and results with those. So if you aren't using hand applications, I wouldn't say that you need those added. In fact, if you've got a tight little spot to do some hand polishing, you can use those Boss creams for that.
Yeah, and the only maybe reason to have one of them, the complete polish does have a filler in it, whereas the Boss creams don't. So I suppose if you wanted to have a product with a filler in your back pocket just in case you needed it, that'd probably be the only reason to purchase complete polish, even though you already have the Boss creams.
It's a good caveat. With really sensitive original paint surfaces, you might want as extremely mild of a process as possible and think that, I can make it look better with that filler without removing paint to get those deeper swirl marks out, or just kind of hide some of the defects as opposed to really working through them, which is not typically what we recommend. No. But if you've got original paint system, you're concerned about that, sure, try something like that.
Well, 99% of the time, the Boss creams aren't going to require being followed by anything, but in the event you want the filler. That's the product for it.
Good call.
All right, Danny Ocampo, he had a couple good questions. He asked, I have a black truck with lots of swirls from previous owner. What are my options? Man, black vehicles that have been used and not cared for. I own one. When I bought it, it was in terrible shape. Probably had never had wax on it its entire life. I mean, your options are to either purchase the products, do it yourself, or take it somewhere to have it done, but you can definitely get those swirl marks out, or at least the vast majority of them, without compromising the finish of your new black truck. So I would, if you have an Orbital or you're interested in buying one, pick one up and do a test spot and see what it takes to remove those. But typically, you're going to be more than capable of getting out the majority of swirl marks with a setup like what we were using during the live with the G9 standard throw Orbital.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of it is dictated by the age of the paint system too. If it's a more modern truck, you're probably going to have clear coat left, but trucks are big. People don't like to wash them, so they'll take them through a tunnel wash. You'll see heavily concentrated swirls. Long story short, you can really remedy those. You can pay somebody to do it because of the size of the truck and potentially the condition of the paint. They're going to be doing multiple steps. It gets expensive for the investment of your time and the equipment needed. And then again, what you want that truck to look like. If you want it to be show car, show truck, yeah, you've got some work to do, but you can definitely improve it even with, just a correcting cream or an all-in-one approach. And then at that point, again, if you're getting used to and or learning the Orbital, you can say, oh, I want to do more. Okay, then introduce a more aggressive step. But you've got options. Black, it's hard to maintain, but once you start caring for it and polishing it properly, it looks the best.
Well, you'll be surprised too, like you said, what an all-in-one can do in a swirled black finish. I mean, even with just a few passes, the difference that can make is pretty outstanding.
Yeah, I'd suggest starting with ceramic all-in-one and an orange pad, see how it comes out, and then again, if you want a more aggressive approach, do that the next time.
Yeah, it just depends on the level of perfection and
yeah,
how bad it is.
You'll get really familiar with the machine and improve the paint system quickly with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Danny Ocampo also asks, after those passes of correcting, what is the sealing stage? So again, we took some time yesterday to differentiate, pure protectant without abrasives, traditional waxes, sealants, and ceramics, all-in-one products that have a mild abrasive combined with a protection element, and then true abrasives that do not contain protective elements. So if you just use a true abrasive and the paint is nude afterwards, and you're happy with the condition, you're not going to do a subsequent polishing step, your next step would be protect the paint. However, before protecting the paint, we would recommend using a product such as our Surface Prep Cleanser to strip any polishing oils that may interfere with the bond of your protection step. Now, it's less critical if you're going to use something that's not as durable, like a carnauba wax, and you're going to apply it every 3 to 4 months. However, it's still best practice to strip off those oils so you get the most out of that process and the most durability out of your protection. It's definitely critical for polymer sealants and ceramics to get maximum durability out of those products by doing that surface prep step.
Yeah.
And then pick your protection: carnauba, synthetic, ceramic. But yeah, after you're done polishing, surface prep is super quick process. Make sure you use soft, edgeless, gentle towels, or plush edgeless towels, or ultra plush edgeless towels are great options for that. And then go to your protection step.
Yeah, the benefits you get from Surface Prep Cleanser, the added durability and performance, drastically outweighs the 5 or 10 minutes that it's going to take to do that process.
100%.
So it's not worth skipping it. Just do it. You won't regret it. David Froelich asked, how do you know if you have a harder or softer clear coat? This was probably one of the best questions that we didn't get to. It is a hard one, no pun intended, to answer without knowing what type of paint or seeing the finish in person. However, a couple indicators to tell whether you have a hard or soft clear. Number one, the condition of the paint. If it's just absolutely hammered, odds are it's on the softer side, especially relative to the age. If it's a newer vehicle that is very bad, odds are it's soft, because a hard finish won't pick up as heavy of defects as quickly as a softer finish will. Doing a test section is really the best way to tell. And then, having some experience working on multiple paint types will give you some frame of reference as to, okay, I know this Japanese vehicle is softer than this German BMW is. But doing that test section is really going to be the best way. I would say beyond that, you can tell when you decontaminate or clay a vehicle. A lot of times if you're seeing lots of marring during a clay process, it's likely a very soft finish. If you're not seeing marring, it's probably on the harder side, specifically if you're using a synthetic tool like our fine surface prep mitt. But really, I keep coming back to it, but doing that test section is going to be the best way. Picking up an Orbital with a orange foam pads, moderately aggressive, doing a test spot. Usually to determine paint hardness, I'll do fewer passes, so 2 to 3 passes, and then figure out what those results are looking like, and you'll be able to kind of pinpoint if your paint is soft, if it's reacting quickly and stuff's coming out of it easily, or is it taking a few more passes, a little more pressure to get the results that you're expecting.
Ultimately, it's experience, right?
Yeah.
And if you have a process you do with most cars, and you do that test section and you say, hey, this car's not responding the same way, that's going to give you your barometer of, do I do less, a finer polish because this paint is softer? Do I do more, a more aggressive polish and or pad setup because this paint isn't responding the way the vast majority of the cars that are in an average range do?
Yeah.
So it varies by manufacturer, age. When manufacturers started doing clear coats early on, those clear coats were softer. Now a lot of German cars have hard ceramic clear coats. They just are harder to encourage durability, long life. It's really, you got to get out there and try. You got to do multiple cars, and then you'll see it come before your eyes.
Yeah, I think a couple general rules of thumb, just for a hard answer here, that we've learned. Japanese cars, Korean manufacturers, Japanese manufacturers, anything coming out of the Asian countries tends to be on the softer side when it comes to paint finish. Vehicles coming out of Europe tend to be on the harder side. Like Nick said, new vehicles, they're using more modern paints and clear coats, so they tend to be harder, more resistant, whereas an older clear is going to be softer. Single stage paints on old vehicles are always going to be softer than a clear coated vehicle. So those are a few kind of generalizations to help you along the way there.
Yeah, and American paint systems, who the hell knows?
They're kind of, middle of the road in most cases. GM paint has gotten a little harder though.
Don't even get me started about Italians, all right?
Yeah.
Okay, David Froelich, we apologize,
yeah,
okay?
that's a tough one.
After using correcting cream you just demoed, can you go directly to your 3-in-1 ceramic? So again, we get this nomenclature mixed up a little bit.
Yes.
Ceramic 3-in-1 is a liquid sprayable ceramic sealant. Ceramic all-in-one, an all-in-one product containing an abrasive and our silane polymer, SiO2 blend. So either one of those as your last step is going to leave a ceramic protection behind. Now the key here is between your correcting cream and that last step, do that surface prep cleanser step we talked about. But yes, if you're happy with your paint condition, just go to your last step, whether that be an all-in-one, so you get that refinement of that milder abrasive and leave protection behind, or simply do the spray wax. The spray wax is gonna go a lot faster too.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're happy with the paint, do your surface prep, do your ceramic 3-in-1 wax. If you still need refinement, then that's a job for the all-in-one. But either way, surface prep cleanser in between those steps, regardless of the path you take.
Yeah, and as long as you're using a foam pad with correcting cream, it's almost always going to finish down ready for that last step product.
Yeah.
Freedom Creek asked, which pads would you recommend for a complete G9 novice? So another good question. You cannot go wrong with the orange foam correcting pad, which is probably one of our most frequently recommended pads, especially for beginners. It gives you good capability without giving you anything that's going to be too risky or more difficult to use. The 1-inch thick pads are best for beginners. Think of it like a touring tire on a vehicle versus a race or performance tire, which would be the Boss pad. So this is The 1-inch thick pad is going to give you more conformability. You know, when you're moving over curves and contours, it's going to absorb vibration a little bit better, things like that. Whereas the Boss pads will be slightly more aggressive because there's not as much foam there to absorb the energy from the Orbital. So we normally recommend 1-inch for beginners. To pair with the orange foam, the black foam is a great 1-2 punch. If you do need to follow the orange foam with a less aggressive product like Complete Polish on a softer pad, the black foam is the way to go. We got those down there. And those are really the two main polishing or correcting and polishing pads that you're gonna need as a beginner. And then of course you can add the red foam waxing pad if you're planning on using strict waxes. However, if you're using all-in-ones or like ceramic 3-in-1 wax, you don't necessarily need that red waxing pad, and these will both serve you very well. We have the same foam variants in the Boss line as well, so that when you are ready to step up to that, you already have some familiarity with the type of foam and how they tend to perform.
Yeah, and so foam pads too, so we talked about the thickness. Obviously we've got a bunch of different sizes, the 6.5 inch, the 5.5 inch. But we had some questions that didn't make it to this about what's different between the pads. So when we talk about a gentler pad, we're talking about density in particular with foam pads. So a orange pad is going to be a little more dense. It's still a medium density foam relative to the more aggressive foams we sell. And then the black foam finishing pad is going to be quite forgiving. So with a softer or less dense foam, you're going to impart less pressure onto the paint, which is ideal for those gentler, refining steps.
Yep.
But an orange pad is the way to go. That's what we pretty much give to everybody to start. It's a nice middle ground, tells you where to go next.
Then of course the microfiber pads are a good option as well. I would say get your feet under you with foam. Microfiber is a little more aggressive. Still not very risky, especially when you're talking the 1-inch variant, but does bump it up a notch. So start out with the microfiber or with the foam, and then you can bump up to the microfiber from there.
Yeah, remember, we're at basics, guys. If you're just getting started, there's a whole nother world of complexity, and we will follow up with another live about that. All right, MJPUSPX, got it all out. When should we use iron and fallout remover in this process? So we did talk a little bit yesterday about the preparatory steps, right? A wash and a decontamination. Now you can do a decon wash using our foaming surface prep. So you get you get both the heavy surface dirt off, and then also can have that foam do a little bit of breakdown in the form of a chemical decontamination. Now iron and fallout remover is also what we would consider a chemical decontamination. However, its stated purpose is to dissolve ferrous particles that are embedded in the paint. So if you were to do a wash or a strip wash with the foaming surface prep, you would dry the car and then apply iron and fallout remover after that step. What that is going to do is work to dissolve any ferrous metal particles that are in your paint system. You'd be surprised at how much you can generally find, in particular if you live in an industrial area like we do here in Tacoma. Lots of rail dust, lots of port activity. And you allow that to dwell on the dry car for about 5 to 10 minutes. It'll turn purple. It'll be really satisfying. You can agitate with an ergo wave foam scrubber if necessary, or just complete a high pressure rinse. At that point, you would dry the car once more and then proceed to a mechanical decontamination. The benefit of iron and fallout is if you're using a clay bar or one of our surface prep tools, the dissolving of that ferrous metal means that it's not getting pulled into your clay bar, which can prolong its life. Yep. So it's a very thorough step. That's about as thorough of a decontamination as it can get. However, you don't necessarily need that if you're going to do chemical and mechanical decon. The one that gets the most out is going to be the mechanical decontamination. But if you're worried about prolonging your tools, you really want to be thorough, you're going to go for a gnarly paint correction, multiple steps.
And being as safe as possible.
Yeah, it definitely can help to, if your clay bar grabs a really bad piece of iron or something hanging in there, and then you drag it around your paint, yeah, that's a negative solution or situation.
Yeah,
so
help prevent some
iron and
marring.
fallout probably maybe once to twice a year, typically.
Yeah.
If your car's garage kept, maybe once a year. So it just depends on your environment. Sometimes if you've got a lighter colored car, you'll actually see what look like little rust spots, and that
Yep.
is the embedded, ferrous particles that you can dissolve with that iron and fallout.
Yeah, I'd say these days probably 75% of the cars I detail, I end up using iron and fallout and mechanical clay.
Yeah.
Another benefit to iron and fallout, I don't think you mentioned this one, is that it'll get into areas that you simply just can't get with a mechanical clay solution. In around emblems, that's a common spot where iron particles will build up. Cracks and crevices around trim pieces and things like that, door molding, those types of areas as well. So a lot of times that's where you'll see the real nasty purple run when you use iron and fallout coming from all
It's
those,
pretty satisfying,
those
don't get me
hidden
wrong.
spaces.
It is definitely another step to add. So yes, it can add some time to your process, but it's definitely the most thorough and, to your point, the safest approach.
Yeah. That's like a advanced beginner type. type
It's
stuff.
easy to use, but it's
very.
definitely another step.
Yeah. So next, Robert Carlson asked, do you demo paint thickness measurement at your facility in Tacoma? Technically, no. That's not one of the common services that we offer in the car care school. However, we do have some paint thickness gauges here, and I'm sure there's probably somebody around here that could do you a solid and give you a couple paint measurements.
One big thing too is if we're looking at your car in person, it's going to be a lot easier for us to kind of gauge the condition and approach. I mean, we do this all the time. If you're rolling in with a 1929 Bentley, which kudos to you because you've got it running and you own a 1929 Bentley, we're probably going to send you somewhere else, or we're going to send you into the back room and find some of our tools and guide your process there. But if you've got a modern SUV or even just like a repainted muscle car, the biggest thing that you're going to see with a modern car is like, you bought it used and there's a repainted panel. We'll be able to see that without having to measure. So it's not always necessary, but yeah, if you are really, really polite, I'm sure we can find some way to measure your paint. But in most cases, detailers can charge for that, or if you're really concerned, if you have a very valuable car with original paint, it might be worth investing in that tool, or again, paying somebody to measure it.
Definitely.
My turn.
To decon.
Okay, decon. So decontamination, obviously a critical step after you wash the car, before you begin polishing. We mentioned why you don't want to, you want to give yourself your best chance for success. Some of the negative things that can happen during polishing are related to poor decontamination, right? If we just talked about that ferrous metal particle that's sitting in your hood, all of a sudden you put a fast spinning orbital on your hood and it picks it up and carries it all around your hood. Guess what? You've got little J marks and pigtails and some really negative effects. So decon, we already kind of coached how to gauge whether your car needs decontamination. I think it's a general rule of thumb that if you're going to polish, you should probably decontaminate, but there are exceptions where a car doesn't need to be decontaminated. So Brian Robertson asks, can you use ceramic speed shine with a synthetic clay bar? The answer is yes. Ceramic speed shine is a great lubricant for our decontamination tools. The one caveat here is that you really don't need to use ceramic speed shine as a lubricant if you intend to polish or correct afterwards. One of the benefits of the approach of ceramic speed shine as a clay lubricant is if your car, say, has ceramic 3-in-1 wax or high solid ceramic coating on it, and it's accumulated above or below surface contaminants over time, one quick way to replenish the performance of that ceramic and decontaminate your car is to use a ceramic infused quick detailer, a la ceramic speed shine. So there's great scenarios where it applies, but if you're intending to correct your car right afterwards, you're going to be utilizing a more expensive lubricant than our standard speed shine, or even our rinseless wash diluted at 6:1. So just keep in mind, what are you going to do next? Or are you just trying to breathe life into your ceramic base in between more substantial processes and breathe a little life and remove those below surface contaminants? That's the great spot to use that.
A perfect solution. Nelson Rodriguez asks, Nick, so Costco towels are not safe to use. We talked a little bit about Costco towels yesterday. They're very common.
I didn't say that specifically.
Find them in a lot of folks' garage. Well, that's why I was gonna provide some some more detail
When
to
are
that.
they right to use?
Yeah, I would say they're typically not safe to use on your paint surface. You know, there are some exceptions there, but if you have a nice finish on your paint that you do not want to impart scratches into, it's usually best to stay away from Costco towels or just generic
Inexpensive microfiber.
edged, inexpensive microfiber. Yeah.
Especially if you've just spent 4 hours perfecting your finish,
Yes.
and then you go to wipe off with
Please.
one of those towels and start seeing swirl marks again, you're going to be very upset.
Yeah, and it's never fun to spend all that time perfecting a paint finish and then take a towel across it and see your work, you know, disappear in front of your eyes as you put a scratch back in there. But Costco towels or any inexpensive microfiber towel, or I mean, there are inexpensive options out there that are good, but the generic microfiber, we'll call it, the Costco towel. Typically you have an edge that is sewn, so a seam edge, and on the corners you'll have threads that are frayed overhanging in production. Those then get melted off, and that creates a very hard, almost, you know, rock-like on some towels. It's literally like a pebble is stuck in the corner of the towel, and that will scratch paint without a doubt 10 out of 10 times, whether you're putting pressure behind it or not. If the corner of the towel is touching your paint, it's gonna scratch it. And then sometimes even with the rest of the edging, some of those less expensive microfibers use you know, cotton thread on the edge, which is going to be more likely to scratch there as well. And then the microfiber material itself tends to be cheaper and more likely to hold on to contaminant if you drop it on the ground or move it across a surface where there's, you know, pine needles or you know, bark chunks, things like that. They tend to hold on to that kind of stuff. So normally Costco towels, we will reserve those types of towels for use in, you know, areas like the engine bay, wheels, wheel wells, door jams, trunk jams, tires, you know, things like that. Surfaces that aren't as delicate and sensitive to scratch, surfaces that are dirtier where you may not want to use a more expensive, nicer towel that you're going to potentially stain or over soil. So there's still a place for them. You just don't want to use them on your paint, specifically if you've just spent a lot of time perfecting it and getting it to a point that you're really happy with.
Yeah, definitely have some on my own, but they're generally dirty work towels, and sometimes, like if you're cleaning up grease or something or oil, they're just getting thrown out.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
So they are disposable because of their price point. They have some utility, definitely not on a just perfected car.
Yeah.
And
If you're in a spot where that's like all you have, or you know, you're forced to use them on paint, grab yourself a pair of scissors and just cut the edges off, and then you're at least a step ahead and not having to worry about those edges scratching the heck out of your paint surface.
All right, next section is pads. We had a lot of questions about pads. We touched on them a little bit in terms of the thickness and density, but a lot of these are just general process around pads. So AR and SoCal asks, how many pads do I need to use with a 3-in-1 for my standard size car? So I think we're talking all-in-one. In general, we recommended yesterday, you know, depending on the size of the car, it's probably 2 to 6 pads per process. Now, one of the things that Sam did mention is these thicker these 1-inch pads are thicker than the Boss pads. You're probably going to utilize more Boss pads in particular because you've got less foam, and as you add more liquid abrasives to it, it will load up. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to tell when that is, because we have some more questions about it. So you might end up using more Boss pads, but again, what you're gaining with the Boss pads is some efficiency, some speed. Again, 2 to 6 is a general range. I think most cars, you're probably gonna max out at 4 if you're using the 1-inch pad, unless it's like a limousine or something. But we'll kind of talk through, we had a couple other specific questions of how do you tell when to switch pads? So in general though, 2 to 6 pads per process. If you're doing a 2-step correction, that means 4 to 12. And again, if we're talking orange pads and black pads, you're just keeping them around. And you'll cycle as you move around the car. We'll coach a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's probably, I know we don't emphasize this enough, and I think people tend to say, oh, you guys are just trying to sell pads. Like, using a lot of pads or more pads than you think you need is literally the biggest tip that I could give any beginner. So it's the one thing, if I go back, looking back on when I first started, things that I wish people would have told me earlier on, it was to swap my pad more and don't try to do a single car with 2 to 3 pads. You're gonna save yourself time and get a better result by swapping those pads out frequently. So if you're not gonna cheap out on one thing, the pad should be that one thing you do not cheap out on. And Orbital's never a good thing to cheap out on either. But Corey Peterson asks, are the pad washers worth the money? My personal opinion, no. I've used one. We actually used to sell one that's still out there on the market today. Back when I first started at Griot's, we haven't sold that thing for probably 11 years, so that was like the first year I started here. But I have always had much more effective pad cleaning by doing it by hand. The pad washers, they can save you a little time, but they're never going to get the pad as clean as kneading it and wringing it out by hand. So I would say no, they're not worth the money.
Definitely not. I mean,
they're pretty expensive.
Yeah, and there's none of them have turned the world on its head. It's nobody likes washing pads. Okay, we'll all come out and say that. The pad washers exist because people are trying to create efficiencies.
Yeah.
Those efficiencies are minimal, and again, you're just not getting as clean of a product in the end. So
I think
pads can last longer if you clean them effectively and clean them every time you use them. And again, that's really annoying because you're talking about some pretty heavy stuff that you're trying to squish out of this thing. But no, I don't have one. He doesn't have one. We haven't developed one. It's just not. You're chasing pink dragons with that one, man.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of people in the professional realm using them. I think there's a reason for that. They can tend to make a mess too. But I would say the most effective way of washing pads that I've found is outlined in our microfiber pad cleaning video that we have, but it's a series of hand washing and then putting them in the machine for a final cycle to get out any remnants. That gets them very clean and will ensure they have a long life.
We do have a video on that on our YouTube channel, so you can look at proper pad washing. Sam does a great job. It's what we all do. And again, nobody likes doing it, but once it's done, we're telling you, hey, you need more pads to clean. You don't want to have more pads and then have to rebuy more pads because you haven't taken care of them in the interim. So
I have actually heard that dishwashers work quite well for cleaning pads, but if you like your marriage, I wouldn't recommend
you want to start get like absolutely elbow drop from the top rope by my wife, then I'll throw them in the dishwasher.
Yeah. Also, be careful if you put them in the machine washer. I know
clean them first before. Yeah. Watch our video.
Yeah.
It shows you the right process, because if you throw them in there without doing any preliminary rinsing, you could leave some stuff in the machine. And once again, nobody likes getting elbow dropped.
Yeah, back in my call center days, I remember a call from a guy who put a load of pads in his washing machine and
his wife threw out the D word, probably.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, speaking of D words, Dennis Barrios. I've seen recommendations to swap from a 6-inch backing plate and pads to 5-inch. Why is that? We did cover this very briefly yesterday. We had some questions about what the G9 comes equipped with. Again, this is, if you buy one tool to get started in machine polishing, it's the G9. It's going to have the broadest utility. It comes equipped with a 6-inch plate, and we generally recommend for a beginner, start with a 6.5-inch pad that's 1 inch thick. Now, this machine is designed to take a 5-inch backing plate. So the benefits of a 5-inch plate, as we kind of related yesterday, if the G9 has a finite amount of power, it drives that power through a gearbox and through a rotation. Now think about a drag car. A drag car has a lot of power, but when they're putting that power down, they do it over a very small wheel. Why is that? To lower rotational mass. So if you're shrinking the diameter of a backing plate, you're definitely putting more energy from that machine through the backing plate and pad to the paint. So it can create more effective results, a little bit more speed. And then Sam mentioned quite a bit about conformability and where you can push it. So, or I would say access, right, is a better way to put it. So the 6-inch pad is great to start and learn and get comfortable. But then as you get comfortable and you want to add some speed to your process, you can upgrade the G9 with that backing plate. We have a 5-inch conversion kit that includes some pads. And I think if you're used to the 6-inch and go to the 5-inch, you'll see better results doing those same processes and increase your efficiency. So that's the main reason people switch over, is they get some experience, they want to add some speed to the process. Then they go to the 5-inch plate, and then they go from the 1-inch pad to the boss pads, and all of a sudden, again, you've really upped the capability of that G9.
Yep. Yeah, one good way to wake, well, not that the G21 needs any waking up, because it definitely does not, but if you need or want to see extra power out of the G21, that's another good mod for that one.
You're talking about the long throw.
Yeah, okay, swapping that one down to the 5.
So our long throw polishers, the G15 and G21, which are in the advanced class we'll do next, which we mentioned yesterday, those are the step up in terms of aggression and effectiveness. Those both can go both ways. The 15 comes with a 5-inch plate stock. The 21 comes with a 6-inch plate stock. A lot of pros will take a 21 millimeter throw tool and put a 5-inch plate on it. And yes, then you've got a very aggressive and fast and effective tool.
Yeah, same reason.
It's going to require a lot of technique, right? A lot of, a little bit more nuance to approaching a car, but you got a really powerful tool there.
Definitely. This is one that I feel silly for not explaining more, but Jamie Signs asks, not sure what you mean by cleaning pads after each panel. So we'll give you some quick demos of that, because we definitely should have shown you that during the live. So obviously, when you're done with the detail, you want to clean your pads, with a detergent and soap, or laundry soap, and get them completely free of product residue. But during the detail, there are ways to clean the pads, to rid them of dead product and clear coat and dried out product, so that you can run that pad longer and still maintain good efficiency and good effectiveness without losing your cutting capability from that foam getting soft or clogged up with product. It's also one way to help get product out of your pad. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. One way to get product out of your pad so that you don't overload that pad. So 2 ways to do it. One is with a pad conditioning brush like you see here. This is the one that we sell.
I'm gonna go get the air while you do that.
Perfect. Set the machine. I usually set it at speed 3 or 4. You don't need it all the way maxed out. Take your brush, spin up your machine, and just move the brush in and out. You can see some of that dust flying out of there on camera. You don't need to use a lot of pressure. You don't want to tear up the face of the pad. The goal here is to just scrub out the pores of the pad, agitate it, so you get all that dried product out, free up the pores, clean that pad out.
Super effective, that brush, when you are using a facing such as microfiber or wool. Those fibers tend to get matted down.
Yep.
And by doing that simple process, you get a lot of that excess polish out and the fibers stand back up, which means you can get closer to replicating your first panel every time you do it. And eventually they do get overloaded. We'll talk about that. But
yeah. And then for the second method, compressed air, this is my preference if I'm working in a spot where I've got an airline or have a portable compressor with me. And this is it's a little quicker. You don't have to turn the machine on. Just simply take your air nozzle and run it from the outside in. And you can literally see that blowing out of that pad as I did that first pass. So that will ensure that you're getting more product out of the pad. And compressed air is a little bit more effective of actually blowing out the pores and getting more of the actual product out so that you're not loading those up quite as quick.
Yeah, and that was a very lightly used pad, right? We only did one section, but as you move from panel to panel, you'll start to see product clogging up the pores of the foam, and that's really a good sign to say, okay, hit it with the brush, hit it with some air, and you'll kind of see it open back up and get rid of some of that excessive product that's creating additional weight and some temperature because that air is not flowing through the foam, right? So you're actually decreasing the effectiveness of the pad if you do not do that cleaning intermittently throughout your process. And if it's obviously not cleaning it up well enough, switch your pad.
Yeah, there is, even if you're doing that every panel or every section that you work on, you're still gonna have to swap pads eventually. That doesn't prevent you from needing to change out your pad. It just gives you a little more time and means that your pad's gonna stay fully effective in between those swaps.
Yeah, so a lot of the next questions we're like dancing around and hitting on some of them as we're going through. So Mark John asks, what are indications that your polishing pads are at the end of their life? All types. So, in general, if you are, a pad is a consumable item, but I think that we all believe that for an average of $12 to $14 per pad, you should be getting a lot of utility out of that pad. In general, I would say if you're not getting 10 plus uses out of a single pad, there's something going wrong with it and you should give us a call. But also, you need to clean and care for your pads. As we mentioned, cleaning your pads after every time you use them is the best way to ensure a long life. Now, at some point, again, you may not be able to get everything out of that pad. That's probably a good time to consider it done. The other thing is if you have something like that you're approaching, like a boat that has rivets or rough edges and you didn't tape it or you were not cautious and it starts to degrade the sidewall of the foam, start getting chunks out of it, that could contribute to a couple things. One, an imbalance in the pad, which would make it very unenjoyable to use. And secondly, the chunks in the foam, it could begin to separate the actual foam material from the Velcro backing. It just would be kind of an entry point, like a little chip where rust starts to form and separate it. The other thing is if you do have our pad back, or our Velcro on the back of the pad is thermoset, it is not glued. But if you do start to see some degradation there, that could just be a sign that, hey, you've put so much temperature and so much use through this foam that it's degraded. And just the back and forth motion of the pad, it could begin to create some stress inside of it over time, and you'll start to see kind of some tears. So if it's not torn or chunked up because of running into rough surfaces, the real indicator is going to be, all right, this is the 10th plus time I've used it. I've cleaned it thoroughly every time. I just can't get everything out of it. It's never going to behave like it did when it was new. That's probably the end of that pad's life.
Yeah. Sometimes like the center hole can be a good indicator too. It'll start to deform. Foam will start to break down there. They last longer than you would think in most cases though, especially if you're taking care of them.
I'd say one of the other things that definitely accelerates degradation is, we did say you can machine wash these, but if you machine dry them, it will start to warp the foam.
Yeah, don't machine dry.
Yeah, that's not recommended. We air dry them, stand them on their end, let the water kind of drip out of them, and you'll be in good shape.
Yeah, in a pinch, you can machine dry them if you need a bunch of pads dry quickly, but you still don't want to use heat.
It just starts to bow, so it kind of like creates a problem, and it's just not recommended.
Yeah. Well, if you wring them out good by hand too, they dry pretty quickly. Without having to machine dry them.
Yeah, if you're doing this as a business, you probably are going to want to own more pads than you think you'll need per job, just in case you have overlap day over day, and or you just run into a paint surface or a process that requires more pads. But
yeah, I know some guys, you do want to be cautious doing this because you're using water around an electric tool, but I know I've seen customers before where they'll wash pads, they'll wring them out, they'll put them on their Orbital and spin it up at full speed to fling moisture out of the pad before they set it aside to air dry.
I used to do that with the pneumatic sanders that we had in my home garage.
Pneumatics
the pneumatic was awesome. You just hear that F1 sound and water and spray everywhere.
Yeah, I grabbed this microfiber pad. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it that well, but yeah, it's going to be tough to see on the camera. But you can kind of see, we have a new one down there.
Yeah.
You can kind of see how the fibers, there it is, how the fibers are clumped together there. Whereas on that new one, they're nice and, it's nice and fluffy. So the fibers on this one look bigger almost. There we go. Now you can see that. So this pad, it's not ready to toss by any means. It's probably been washed, a handful of times, but you can see those fibers are starting to clump, whereas these are nice and fluffy still. So that's one sign with a microfiber pad that it's starting to wear out. I would still use this for probably another at least 3 to 5 details. Yeah,
I think I said my general rule of thumb is you should bare minimum get 10 uses,
Yeah.
10 substantial processes, but there's no reason they can't last longer. But keep in mind, they are a wear item. We will take care of you if something fails prematurely. I'm definitely not going to advocate for us to say, hey, like, he just polished a Sherman tank and, you know, like, was running up against the treads in every rivet possible, and it looks like, you know, a dog ripped it in half.
Polish your diamond plate toolbox.
We're looking for, you know, flaws and things that are premature failures, as opposed to created by the conditions that you use them in.
Yeah, and again, that's another reason to swap pads frequently. They'll last a heck of a lot longer. If you're trying to run one pad on a whole car, you may only get, you know, 2 or 3 cars out of that single pad before it's ready to toss.
It's a lot harder to get polish that is down deep in the core of the foam versus, you know, keeping it kind of towards the top and not oversaturating the pad, and easier to clean and maintain.
See, Mark John, oh no,
Yeah.
that one's what you just answered. Sam Armour 3 asks, how long will the pad last? When do you know when to change your pad? So that, we just covered that one. He also asks, what's the differences in the different pad types? So I think we've talked about this somewhat, but we can go ahead and complete the loop on this one here. So we have foam pads and fiber pads. Those are kind of the 2 primary pad types. And then you have the different densities of foam that Nick started talking about a little bit earlier. So let's grab this stack.
Right,
in the
sorry.
Boss pad, no, you're good. I'm trying to get all the fiber pads in there. So with the Boss pads, we have 3 fiber options and 4 foam options. The fiber options range from microfiber cutting, which has no foam interface. This is the most advanced, most aggressive pad that we offer. Then you have the standard microfiber pad, which has the red foam interface there to give you more conformability and slightly detune the aggressiveness of that pad. And then you have the wool, which also has that red foam interface, but is a fiber pad. The wool pads are gonna run a little bit cooler than microfiber, so they tend to be slightly less aggressive, but still have a very good cut rate. Both of these can cause a slight haze or marring, specifically in soft finishes or plain color finishes, so non-metallics, you'll see that haze more. So typically you want to follow these with a foam variant. It's not always necessary depending on the color and paint type, but normally you're going to want to follow a fiber pad with a foam pad. And then for the foam pads, you have the white fast correcting foam, which is the most dense. This is our most aggressive foam pad. Then you have the orange correcting, which is the middle of the road. This is a medium density, one of our most recommended pads. Then you have the yellow perfecting foam, which is a softer density. This is for a finishing foam. This one has a little more density than some of the other finishing foams I've used over the years, which gives you great ability to remove haze in harder paint finishes. That's one weakness of a lot of the soft finishing foams, like the black finishing foam here, is it's very soft. So in a hard paint, sometimes this won't be enough to cut haze out. That's where the yellow foam comes in. This would tend to be more of a polishing pad, and then your black foam finishing pad, which is our softest of the Boss line and the standard line as well. The red foam is going to be a little softer than this, but very comparable. And the red foam is just a waxing pad. So you have the fiber versus foam, and then you have the different foam densities. With some manufacturers, they'll put different foam density interfaces underneath their fiber pads. We just we keep it relatively simple with the standard microfiber with the interface, and then the fast cutting without.
Yeah.
So
we've got 4 categories of the pads in the differentiation: size or diameter, thickness, density of foam, and facing. Right. So the ones that have no foam and a microfiber facing, going to be the most aggressive. As they walk up to lowest density, they get less aggressive. And then the thicker pads are going to conform better to curves and dampen the power of the orbital. The thinner pads are going to transfer more energy, creating more effectiveness. The smaller the diameter of the pad, with a fixed tool, you're going to get again more energy transfer from the tool itself. So if you go from a 6-inch pad to a 5-inch pad on a G9, you're just going to get more energy transfer from that G9. So
that's a hard one to answer.
Yeah, it's the but those are generally the 4 categories, right? Yeah. Diameter, thickness, foam density, and/or facing. All right.
Yeah, that was a good summary.
Conditions. So these are just general conditions you guys had encountered that you wanted specific answers for. We've got Butch saying, I have lots of water spots. How should I get rid of those? So water spots have, there's a variety of water spots. If you are just encountering water spots and they are light, non-acid rain water spots, there's a good chance that just a general wash can remove those. I have a feeling you're talking about more intense etched water spots, and we saw some of those on the Range Rover yesterday. A lot of those can be created by acid rain, irrigation water getting hit by a sprinkler, and then the sun coming up, freezing it on the hood. And if that water is nasty, yes, those minerals will start to penetrate the clear coat and etch your paint. So once again, start with the same process we illuminated yesterday. Wash the car. If that remedies the water spots, good on you, you're lucky. Next step, decontaminate the car. You can do as thorough or as minimal of a decontamination as possible, but more thorough means more chance you don't have to polish those out. So if you're trying to chase water spots, try that first. Lastly, you're going to have to do some type of polishing and or compounding, paint correction process. As we recommended yesterday, start with a moderate approach. Orange pad, correcting cream, or orange pad with complete compound. Test how many panels or passes you need on a test section. If that remedies the water spots with a mild approach, excellent. If you need a more aggressive approach, you've learned that from doing that test panel. But unfortunately, at some point, if those are etched in the paint and washing and decontaminating have not removed them, you're going to have to do some paint correction.
Yep. Most common.
Did I actually get that without you adding anything on?
No.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, come on.
What's up, guys?
I'm not that bad.
We want to help each other out, okay? We want to make sure everything, but I hate water spots, but up here our water spots aren't as bad as, I got rained on in California like I was sharing yesterday on a ceramic coated car, and man, I had to polish my hood and reset it.
Yeah. Well, and I think you said this, but most water spots are caused by irrigation water or hose water. Yeah. So don't always assume that it's just the rain, because you'll be surprised. Charles King asked, what polish would you use on a new car? That's a tough one. As we mentioned yesterday, just because it's new doesn't mean that it's in good condition. But I would tend to recommend like ceramic all-in-one. It's a great baseline for a new vehicle. It's going to get out light stuff from the dealer and add very durable protection. Great self-cleaning abilities, going to keep it cleaner longer, make it easier to wash when you do need to wash it. Yeah, great product for a new car.
Pretty mild approach,
yep.
Right? And it gives you the confidence to use the machine, and if you do that, improve it, great. If you see that deeper stuff, next time you go to polish your car, you can try a different process. But
yeah.
Almost certain that if you buy a car off the lot or don't act like a total asshole and make them refuse to wash it upon delivery, you're going to have dealer installed scratches.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Chris McD.
One of my favorite terms, dealer installed scratches.
I recently got my Ford Bronco after 2 years of waiting, and I was that asshole.
Yeah.
And it benefited me because we did some new car prep in a video you'll see soon, and man, I had nothing to fight. But when I got to the dealer, they said, you are the only person I have ever talked to who refused to allow us to wash the car.
The only smart person.
Well, I think that sounds appropriate to me, so I don't know what's wrong. Is there something wrong with that? Because don't touch it.
Well, important to remind all you guys that at least all of the dealerships that I know, they do not hand wash these cars. They're going through tunnel washes. Either they have a tunnel at the dealer on their property, or they have a deal, a commercial deal with the local car wash tunnel. So they're not hand washing it, and if they are, I'd be skeptical about that too.
Yeah, because they're probably hand washing it with the same stuff that they hand washed 100 other cars. So, all right, Chris McD asks, what is the best product for gel coat on an 87 Boston Whaler? It's in pretty good shape, but needs some brightening. So 87, it's pretty old. Brightening versus oxidation, generally on a Boston Whaler. I haven't seen a lot of them that are any color other than white.
Yep, it's a great boat.
Yeah, they're unsinkable boats. But yeah, white gel coat generally oxidizes pretty heavily. So I have always found that a well-maintained or just a newer gel coat or gel coat in general responds really well to our one-step sealant. However, if there is heavy oxidation, you're gonna have to do a heavier cut. So I have found that because of the nature of gel coat, right, you're gonna pull a lot of material, in particular if it's oxidized. I don't get as great a success with our microfiber or wool pads just because you're pulling all that material in. So I like our fast correcting foam and then our fast correcting cream to remove the oxidation. Once you've removed that, then you're dealing with, again, a lower layer of the gel coat. It's time to protect it. So one-step sealant or even ceramic all-in-one would be great options there. And then, yeah, the oxidation, if not, will come back if the boat is not well protected, if you're in a very high sun area. But I can tell you a lot of people speed through gel coats with diminishing abrasive and rotary polishers with wool pads. That obviously can lead to hologramming. It will kill the oxidation, but you'd have to do a secondary step. So.
Yeah, that fast correcting foam, that's like the secret weapon for oxidation.
Yeah,
so.
we have a newer gel coated boat that has some dark blue on it and some white, and on some of the heavier scuffed areas, that stuff just powers right through it.
Takes it right out. Let's see, Dan Dutrich asks, which do I use to get out moderate to deep scratches? So that's going to be somewhat dependent on the paint type again, but typically when you're working on moderate to deep scratches, you're going to start with complete compound. And I would either go, if you're talking standard pads, either the orange correcting foam or the microfiber finishing. I don't know. I think that might be the only one we don't have up here.
Yeah,
but
we got a lot of pads in
we
there.
do have a standard 1-inch thick microfiber red interface with white foam. That one's going to be a little more aggressive than the orange foam pad. So if I'm going after moderate to severe defects, most of the time that's what I'm going to reach for. There are situations where I'll compare this combo next to complete compound and microfiber and kind of judge the difference. So, did I get the finish that much better with the microfiber, and is that improvement enough to justify potentially having to do a second step if I start with microfiber and then have to follow with foam? That being said, like I mentioned earlier, you don't always have to follow microfiber with foam, but normally you're going to want to unless you're working on like a light colored metallic finish where you don't see the haze caused from the microfiber.
Yeah, when you say moderate to deep scratches, you're definitely talking a more substantial technique, right? A more substantial process. So you can always go into long throws and fast correcting cream and more aggressive approaches. But from a beginner perspective, I echo your suggestion, which is try the microfiber fast finish pad and complete compound. Knowing that if you're dealing with those type of defects, it's probably an older system or you've inherited a new to you car. You're going to do a substantial correction process the first time. Now, if you're just getting started, those processes aren't going to get you in too much trouble, but they may not get everything out if you're dealing with really nasty stuff. But you will have learned a lot about machine approach and then can go different ways from there if you're really chasing perfection.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out too that what someone defines as a deep scratch changes from person to person. I know it's one of the problems we run into a lot with trying to help people diagnose stuff over the phone.
I've got no scratches on my car.
Or over email. Yeah, you hear I don't have scratches, or someone says deep scratch when it's really a key mark that's down to the primer. That's a deep scratch that's not going to come out no matter what you do with an Orbital. That'll require a repaint in all situations if it's down to the primer. So make sure you have some I guess, basis for what you're considering a deep scratch. Our general rule is that if you can feel it with your fingernail, it is not going to come out with a random orbital. It's going to require either wet sanding and rotary or refinishing.
All right.
Just wanted to get that out there.
You're good. Yeah, we should probably do a video about
Shoot.
judging scratches. Wasn't me.
Bump, bump.
All right, so Guy Crouch asks, will the orbital polishing take oxidation off the paint? As we mentioned, it will, yes. Orbital polishing is a great way to remove oxidation. However, oxidation is a pretty nasty circumstance to encounter. So you're gonna have to utilize multiple steps, most likely, and more pads. Oxidation is comparable to like a single stage paint job, where you're going to get material coming out into the pad. So you want to cycle your pads quite a bit. And then again, once you've removed all that oxidation, then you can proceed to a protection and or finishing step. But you pretty much have to cut through that. Otherwise, you're going to get that chalky look for quite some time. So you can use it with, or you can remove oxidation with machine polishing. You're going to want, again, probably a more aggressive foam setup as opposed to the fiber setups. And then cycle your pads, because those will get loaded up, not just with polish, but with the actual paint that you're pulling out of that.
Yep.
It may get ugly for a little bit, but trust the process, start slow, check your work, and repeat that around the car.
Yeah, for sure. Jamie Signs asked, I just polished my Mazda with a G9 polisher with ceramic all-in-one wax, and there's a halo effect in the paint. What did I do wrong? That's a tough one, being that we don't see the car here in front of us, and again, that the halo effect, I'm assuming you're talking about kind of like a light flare effect that will move when you move with the light on the paint finish. That could be two different things. It could be either that the ceramic all-in-one has not fully set up yet. It's common that after you apply a product, specifically a rich protection like ceramic all-in-one, the silane polymers and the ceramic ingredients take a little bit of time to fully cure and set up. And before that happens fully, if you wipe across the paint, you'll see those, those light flares or halos move. That's typically what that means, that those actives are not fully set up yet. Walk away, stop touching the paint, give it 30 to 60 minutes and come back, put a light back on it, pull it back out in the sun. Normally that will have evaporated off and you won't see that anymore. If you do still see halos, it could potentially be swirls that are left behind or haze that was put into the paint, depending on the softness of the paint or the pad type that you're using. Now, ceramic all-in-one by itself on a foam pad typically is not going to cause haze because of the fine abrasive that it uses, unless your paint finish is very soft. Even with just an orange foam pad on a really soft, like plain black finish, if it's extremely soft and delicate, you could see a very light haze from that. And then if you're using a microfiber or a wool pad, that's most likely going to cause a little bit of haze that could also cause those halos that you're referring to.
This gentleman agree with all of those assessments. He was asking a lot of questions about using too much as well. So that is what I also think could be part of this.
Yeah, residue.
We did try to kind of show you the proper amount, just from the buttering perspective, and then what you add as you go panel to panel. So yeah, if you use too much of these products, it's going to cause you problems just in your wipe off. And so try for the buttering process. Yeah, you want to try and get the majority of the facing, wet, so you don't put dry foam on it. But don't overdo it, right? You're not squeezing out half the bottle.
No.
And then 3 small drops should be enough to cover that next panel after the pad has been lubricated. So. I think that his problem may have been caused by overusing it, and then not being able to remove all of it as he was continuing to wipe. So.
That's a good call, totally. And another thing that comes to mind relating to that is swapping out your towels when you're wiping off product residue is more important than a lot of people would think. Just like when you're wiping up liquid off the surface, towel gets saturated, you have to swap out to a new one. The same thing will kind of happen with wax or product residue, where all sides of the towel will just get a buildup where it's going to stop removing it. It's going to tend to redeposit it, a thin layer of it back onto the paint. So make sure you're swapping out and turning those wipe-off towels too.
We do sell pads and towels, but we are trying to help you get the very best out of your process.
Yes.
And again, most of our pads come in multiple count packs, and so do our towels. You don't have to buy net new towels. Just if you have 6 clean towels on your counter, don't try and do the whole car with one.
Yeah.
Just be sensitive to what it's picking up, and as soon as you are having trouble wiping up excess, get a new towel. Guess what? Start over, flip it section by section, and
you'll be surprised how much time and energy swapping towels, swapping pads will end up saving you in the long run.
Yeah. Jim DeBroy asks, are there any special requirements for non-metallic painted surfaces such as carbon fiber or plastic? Plastic, definitely. It's going to be a little bit softer in most cases, so you definitely want to start with pretty mild approaches. I do know I've had great success with correcting cream and an orange foam pad to get rid of some heavy buildup on plastic. Mm-hmm. Carbon fiber, I tend to err on the side of, if it is clear coated, you can treat it pretty similarly to a 2-stage paint system, in that clear coat can be clarified and improved and protected to prevent oxidation, because they don't generally overdo clear coat on carbon fiber, right? It's a weight saving accessory.
Exactly. It's usually
so they're not
thin.
putting a ton of paint on it, but that is where a lot of oxidation happens, right? On thinly clear coated carbon fiber.
Yep.
So I mean, and if they're smaller pieces, you can do hand polishing as well, but generally, I think correcting cream, or you can start with an even milder polish like complete polish or our perfecting cream. Try those spots out. Both of them, again, are just going to be slightly more delicate, but will respond well to polishing.
Yeah. Carbon fiber, like Nick said, is almost always clear coated, especially on factory vehicles. There's very few occasions where it's not cleared.
Some are matte clear, right?
The dry carbon in the Senna, I think some of that's probably raw, but you don't see that often. And then just as a note, Nick was talking about for plastic, correcting cream on plastic, he's referring to glossy plastic, not like a matte or textured plastic, which is also common. You get lots of plastic surfaces, especially on modern vehicles. You do not want to try to polish a textured or matte plastic finish.
Yeah, something like this little bumperette, or it's everywhere on a modern vehicle. Your cowl, lenses, I think, is a good probably caveat, right?
Or like a piano black B pillar.
Yep.
Those are common. Glossy plastic is great to polish. Matte or textured, do not. And then painted plastic, we get that question a lot too. Like, do you approach painted plastic any differently than you do painted metal? Not really. However, it will respond differently sometimes. You'll see that your bumpers might either respond a little faster, a little slower than the adjacent metal panels, or you may have to even swap to a different combo to get a quick result on a painted plastic panel.
We're coming up on an hour here, Sam, or maybe we've blown by it. Who knows? But
I think we're like just over.
Let's get a couple questions down out of here, and then we've got a winner, so we might as well announce that now. But for your immense participation and great questions, Charles King, you are going to win our G8 and G9 two-step ceramic kit. So one of the things he told us, outside of asking like 20 questions that were all very excellent and pointed as he's trying to do his research about orbitals, was he just bought our pressure washer, our foaming system, our ultimate microfiber towel kit, our surface prep kit, speed shine. He has to save up for an orbital. Charles, no you don't. You got one on us, bud. So get after it.
Ready to have some fun.
Yeah, thank you for your business, and hopefully you learned something from us yesterday and today, or Wednesday and what will be Friday when you see this.
Yeah.
And email us at social@griotsgarage.com, man.
You've got all the right supporting products to make that orbital kit, or to get very good use out of that orbital kit. So it's gonna be an awesome product set that you'll have there.
I really like this question from Jonathan Cooper. Why don't you answer that, and then I'll pick one to end the session on.
So Jonathan Cooper asked, what are your recommended speeds for a compound, polish, and all-in-ones? How many section passes for each? That is a great question. Tough one to answer quickly for me, but for compound, you're almost always going to be at a higher speed, get the job done quicker, get through those more severe defects with that higher speed. So compound, I'm almost always at speed 5 or 6. Sometimes I'll go down to 4 if it's a soft paint finish and I'm compounding, but mostly speed 5, bump up to speed 6 when necessary. For a polish, I would say you're going to be around speeds 3 to 4. Usually, at your polishing step, the hard work has already been done, or the finish doesn't require the speeds that severe defects do. So you can bump it down to 3 and 4, kind of relax, zone out a little bit more. And then all-in-ones, I would go 3 to 5 depending on the paint condition. Yep. So obviously speed 3 if it's just some minor stuff that you're working out. Speed 5 if you're up against more moderate defects.
And those are speeds for the G9.
Yes.
But generally those same kind of speed indicators could translate up to the long throws.
Yeah, I'd say I use those kind of rules for all tools.
However, we did have a question. I don't know if I think we probably skipped it or it's in here somewhere, but we had a question about, do the same speeds that you use with a G9 apply to the G8? And I would answer that in almost all scenarios, I'm running a slightly higher speed on the G8 than I am in the G9.
Yeah, agreed.
You've just got a smaller surface area. You got plenty of power in this machine, but I think just cranking it up to a higher speed moves the pad a little bit more. In particular, if you're trying to fit it into tight places. We kind of talked about how if you heel and toe or aren't really balancing the machine well, it can stall and slow. Well, that's particularly exaggerated if you're, kind of down at an angle or just really massaging it. So a higher speed setting on this tool will help keep that pad rotating. So they aren't direct translations. So you might find, I think in general, the rule of thumb would be the same.
Yeah.
Start at that lower speed, speed it up as the
one.
situation dictates, but it may be, +1 on these smaller format tools.
And that's a really good point. And worth mentioning too, the smaller the pad size, the more difficult it is to prevent that pad from bogging, because with a really small pad, a small input of angle is going to have more of an effective change on how that pad's contacting the surface. So
it's just going to upset the balance of the machine.
So bumping that speed up with the G8, that's definitely a good
As Sam mentioned yesterday, that's why this is you will develop your technique over time, as opposed to just jumping ship, getting a gear driven, and steering right through it.
Yeah. Well, and it's all, like we were both saying yesterday, you never know everything when it comes to paint correction. There's always something to learn. Yeah,
and if you're enjoying it and improving your paint and it makes you happy, that's all we can ask for.
Yes, sir.
All right, we got some quick housekeeping to do, and then we're out of here. But hopefully you guys have learned some stuff. So Kevin Prisgay asks, will there be any demos at the Indy Caffeine Gasoline in October? Without a doubt. We're going to have plenty of staff there that can look at your car, give you personal advice, and obviously it'll be a great sale. Mark Welch asks, is Griot's coming to Scottsdale for Good Guys in November? See you there. We had another gentleman ask, will we be at SEMA? Yes, we will be. We will be in the West Hall. I can't remember the booth number off the top of my head. We'll definitely be talking about SEMA at our next live in October. So tune into that one. We'll do even more of this if you guys are liking it. We really appreciate your participation. And this is a quick question. Ron Shoup had asked, are complete compound and polish still using sub-micron abrasive technology as opposed to diminishing abrasive technology? The answer is yes. These are sub-micron abrasives as well. So Ron, I guess you're taking us out.
All right.
Okay, thank you everyone. Hopefully you learned even more. Charles, congratulations on your G8 and G9 kit. Put all that stuff to work. If you guys gain the confidence to go polish your cars, let us know. Drop a comment below, subscribe if you would, please. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And we'll see you around. Thank you.
Have fun in your garage.
Have fun in your garage.